Okay, for our final presentation in the technical track this morning, before lunch, we have Matthew Coons. Matthew is an IT incident responder and threat analyst at the University of Michigan. He regularly completes digital forensic investigations, coordinates IT security incident investigations, and maintains UM's threat intelligence capabilities. He's a member of the Michigan chapters of the InfraGard and High Technology Crime Investigation Association. We also just found out that Matthew plays violin and was taught via the Suzuki method, which is really awesome. Matthew's going to talk about MITN Insulating the University of Michigan from Attack. Let's give Matthew a hand.
Okay, everyone hear me? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So first off, you probably noticed on the door out there are two people's names on this talk, but I'm the only one here. Kevin is sorry that he couldn't make it. He had an unfortunate family situation come up, so he's not going to be here today. The other thing is, I do have MITN stickers, so if anyone wants a sticker, I have lots of these. So they made me tons and tons. So I can hand them out if anyone's interested. So first off, I want to start with who am I? So I'm an incident responder at University of Michigan. I've been there for 2.5 years, and I really love my job. I have lots of fun. And I'm here to talk to you about threat intelligence and what we're doing at U of M. So the other thing is you'll notice that there is a ask a question thing at the top. The idea was that Kevin would look at the questions while I was talking and vice versa. But I'm only here, so if you ask a question, I'll see it pop up, and I can answer it. Or you can raise your hand as well. I like questions. I like to interact. So first off, I want to start by talking about what threat intelligence is, giving everyone an overview of what we're talking about, and just kind of dive into that. So by a show of hands, who knows what threat intelligence is or has an idea what it is? Cool. So about half and half. So what are we talking about? For this talk, I'm talking about indicators of compromise, or IOCs. And the idea is that we are going to take automated actions to generate alerts, block attacks, stuff like that. And we need to do things like have confidence levels for the IOCs. We need to have tags for them so we can know what's malware, what's phishing, stuff like that. And then we need to add comments as well so we can go back and look at the IOCs and know what happened, right? So we can know oh, this was related to a specific attack or something like that. And then we're specifically talking about IP addresses, DNS names, email addresses, and hashes. And so for this talk, when I mention threat intelligence, I'm talking about IOCs. There are different types of threat intelligence that people do, but this is really what we're focusing on. So before threat intelligence, what were some of the issues that we were trying to solve? What were some of the problems that we ran into? So malware containment was a slow process. It was also high cost. If we needed to remediate malware, we would submit a ticket to our infrastructure team, and they would have to block the IP address at the border or something like that. It was slow. It might take them a couple of hours to do that. It wasn't quick. It wasn't repeatable. It wasn't automatic. It wasn't automated. And we don't have a firewall at the border, so that might be shocking to some people. But I guess who doesn't have a firewall at the border? Raise your hand. So like one person raised their hand. So that's kind of industry standard. Everyone has a firewall at the border. But we're a huge research institution. We really like academic freedom, and so we wanted to figure out a way to kind of protect our users without having that firewall at the border. Same thing for phishing remediation. We didn't have a way to block malicious DNS names across the infrastructure. If there was a phishing site, we would actually do a lookup for the IP address, and we would have that blocked at the border. But once again, it was a manual process that we'd have to work with our infrastructure team on, and it wasn't repeatable, and it wasn't automated. So I'm curious, who is using threat intelligence in your organization today, or leveraging it in some fashion? Cool. So I see a couple of hands, but not a lot of people. So I'm hoping that this will be very relevant to everyone, and give everyone an idea of what you can do in your environment. So when we started going down this road, probably about 2 years ago, we wanted something that was low cost, and we didn't know if that meant open source or not. We were kind of gauging our options, looking at different things that we could do. We wanted something that was scalable as well. So we didn't want to have a platform that was really only with a certain vendor or would only work for a certain type of situation. We wanted something that we could use really everywhere. We wanted to consume threat intelligence from different sources as well. So we didn't necessarily just want to have one threat intel feed. We wanted to correlate all of this different threat intelligence and use it in our environment. And then we wanted something that was a supported platform, something that others were supporting as well, not just us, because there's turnover. And we want to make sure that this is industry supported. So what we ended up creating was MITN, stands for Michigan Intelligence for Threat Negation. I have stickers that say the same thing. And this is really our brand of threat intelligence and what we're doing at U of M. So MITN is really more than just a threat intel database. It's a framework for collecting, sharing, generating, and consuming threat intel. So we didn't necessarily just want to consume it, we didn't just want to share it, we wanted to do all 4 of those things and try to do them well. And we wanted to, really the value of MITN is it's not just the collection. A lot of people say, oh, I'm doing threat intelligence. And what does that mean? Are you just consuming a bunch of feeds and then looking at those manually if you want to, or are you actually using that information to block threats in your environment? So that's really what we wanted to do with MITN. We wanted to start at the generation and collection and then go all the way through to mitigation. So why name it? Because our boss said to. That is really the only reason that we named it. And it's funny because we didn't realize the positive impact that naming what we were doing would have. It really helped at an executive level for them to understand what all of these different components were doing. So if I said, oh, I'm going to turn on DNS redirection, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, it was difficult to understand how it fit into the picture. But saying, well, this is part of our threat intelligence framework that we're protecting everyone with, that's a lot easier to understand. And so, it really makes for a great promotional material as well. It's really great. And so, as you're noticing here, these are a bunch of different names that our boss did not like. And the last one, Mint, is what we came up with. And he said, no, change a couple of the letters around and you have MITN. And so in Michigan, there's this smitten with the mitten thing. So that's why we named it MITN, because it looks like, Mitten looks like the lower or the lower peninsula of Michigan. So that's the idea. So the next section is, well, where are we going with this project? What's the roadmap? And just so I'm staying true with the Michigan theme, this is actually a road in Michigan, and Michigan is this beautiful in the fall, so you definitely come visit. So I wanted to start with a kind of a roadmap slide and show everyone the different components and how they all work together. So in the middle we have the SIF server, and this is really the code that's collecting, generating, and sharing our threat intelligence at the center. And SIF, it stands for the Collective Intelligence Framework. It's actually a product that's developed by REN-ISAC. Has anyone heard of REN-ISAC before? Yes, a few? Okay. So it's a research-oriented information sharing group. It's developed and kind of tested and supported by them, so a lot of higher education organizations use SIF. And then from there we have open source threat intelligence feeds that come into the platform. And the cool thing is this was configured out of the box. When I installed this, I didn't have to configure any of this. It just automatically started consuming all of this threat intelligence. There's a lot of kind of knowledge built into the platform about how confident we are about different sources. That's all configured out of the box. And then I'm also configuring information from REN-ISAC as well. So I'm pulling in a threat feed that they send to me. And then I'm generating threat intelligence internally. So we're looking at things like honeypots, Splunk, Bro, and stuff like that. And we're identifying what's in our environment that is bad. And so the real value of this is that we're not just consuming external threat feeds and saying, what do other people think is bad? We're identifying threats in our environment and making it really relevant for us as well. Added a couple of arrows between those different sources to show that the idea is these different sources of threat intel do talk to each other. So if I have an external feed or external indicator and I have an internal indicator and they match, I'm going to do something. I'm going to increase the confidence of it, or I'm going to make an alert or something like that. So it's kind of a confidence boosting and improvement process. And then there's a way to query the data directly. So there's a Chrome plugin. You can look for a specific indicator for like forensic purposes or something like that. You can also add indicators directly with the Chrome plugin as well, which is really cool. And then the first group of systems on the right are active mitigation systems. So these are taking kind of actions. They're blocking threats based on the information that we're feeding it from MITN. Second group is monitoring and alerting. We're doing that in Splunk. Everyone probably knows what Splunk is, I'm assuming. It's kind of a log correlation and event management system. And then we're also sending the information to our peers as well. So we want to share this information out and not just keep it at U of M, because we're all about collaborating and making everyone better through that collaboration. So how are we consuming threat intelligence? So first off, we have a Big Ten Academic Alliance Threat Intel sharing group, and we actually we meet every month and we share thousands of indicators between the Big Ten schools, which is really cool because the idea is school 1 sees an attack, and then by the time it gets to us, we might have it blocked at our border or something like that. And so by everyone sharing this information, we're all going to be better secured and kind of collaborate better. We're also pulling in open source threat feeds, as I mentioned earlier. We have over 25 of those that we pull in every hour. And then that, all of that equals around 60,000 actionable indicators that are updated every hour. So this is fresh information, new threats that we're seeing, and then we're able to block these in our environment. So this is a slide of exactly how we generate threat intelligence. Actually don't know what it is. I think it has something to do with like generating electricity or something. But what are we doing internally to generate threat intelligence in our environment? So we're looking at our local log data to identify attacks in Splunk. And that's really kind of the central place where all of our logs in our environment go. Everything that we want to log, we send to Splunk, or at least security logs. We're looking at our log data sources like deny hosts, remote desktop, and stuff like that to identify top attackers that are trying to get into our environment and then take that information and push it into our threat intel system to block that at a global level. So that's all great, but we wanted to be better about how we generated threat intelligence at U of M and across the Big Ten. We wanted a solution that was really, really easy, almost as easy as pressing the red easy button. And so we were really looking for something that anyone could participate in. It was flexible and scalable. It could identify attack trends across multiple environments. And so it wasn't specific to what we had configured or someone else had configured. We wanted a solution that really was extensible and open. And we wanted to collaborate with our Big Ten peers, at least to start, on this project. So that's where we come up with MITN sensors. So as this meme might indicate, they are honeypots. So right now we have MITN honeypots deployed at 3 Big Ten peers and at U of M. This is actually a pretty new initiative that we've gone down, a new road that we've gone down with our threat intel sharing group. So this is ramping up as more schools are participating in this. We're seeing a lot of indicators every day across the different schools that have these sensors deployed, and we can identify threats across multiple environments, which is really cool for us because we can start fingerprinting attackers and stuff like that. All the raw data goes into Splunk as well, and that's really how we are building these sensors. So does anyone know what these things are on my desk? Yes? Raspberry Pis, you're correct. So we're deploying a bunch of Raspberry Pis at U of M. You can use really any Linux system. You don't have to use a Raspberry Pi. But the reason that we wanted to use Raspberry Pis is because we can give these to units and say, hey, install this on your network, and they don't have to do any work. because usually, units, at least in our environment, they have a lot of work to do, and they're making sure that their systems are running for the researchers, and so we wanted to help them participate without making them do a lot of work. And so this is the first group of MITN sensors that I have on my desk. Thankfully, I do have some interns that help me with this, but I didn't want to make them configure all of these manually, because this was the first group of 12 that I have. I have a picture. That's the group of 50 more that I bought, and we just purchased 50 more. So that's a lot of manual work. And so we wanted to automate the configuration, and so we're using Ansible for that. Sensors can be set up very, very quickly. When I say minutes, it's not minutes of dedicated time interacting with the actual system. It's minutes for it to run, for it to install the script and stuff like that. Really, it's a couple of clicks to start the Ansible install, and then you just wait for it to finish. Sensor updates are easy as well, because we can use Ansible to interact with the systems and update them if we need to. But we tried to, on the front end, automate all of that. So we have, they're configured to automatically update on a nightly basis and stuff like that. So this is working really well for us, because we're going to our units and saying, we want you to help us make the campus more secure. Go put this on your network, and then we'll give you the feed that these things are generating. We'll give you the information that these things are generating, which is really cool, because they feel like they're helping, and then they're getting value out of it as well. So this is actually a GIF that just keeps on running. It's like an incredibly long one. But what are we doing in our environment to use this information? So it's great that we're generating a bunch of threat intelligence, and it's great that we're consuming a bunch of threat intelligence, but what threats are we blocking? How are we leveraging this information? So we have three different categories of systems. We have active mitigation systems, and these are going to block threats. They're not just going to tell us about something bad, it's actually going to block the bad thing. And then we have monitoring and alerting systems. And these are going to tell us, hey, something bad's happening over here. You should go over and fix it. And then we have peer mitigation, where we're actually sending this information to our peers so they can block threats in their environments. I guess, real quick, any questions before I go on? Because I'm going to go into some pretty detailed stuff. Yes? So the way it works is the raw data is in Splunk, but we identify top attackers, we enrich the information, and then we take that enriched information and put it back into SIF, back into the shared information, the threat intelligence repository, and from there, it's shared out with our peers. So Splunk is just the raw log generation source. Yes, we're looking at how to do that. From what I can tell, there's not a lot of open source or even vendor IPv6 threat intel right now. But we're looking at how we're going to do that, especially like in AWS, because we're also full speed to the cloud. So figuring out how we're going to do IPv6 in the cloud as well. Cool. So the first thing that we wanted to do is to block phishing and malware without a budget request. So who loves budget requests in their room? So like 2 people. So that's, there's always one. But budget requests aren't great, especially if you can do it at no cost. So what we're doing with this is we're actually just using DNS redirection. So DNS redirection is a DNS RPZ, which is a response policy zone. And we are redirecting users from going to bad domains that we've identified from our threat intel repository. So when they try going to a bad site, they just end up on a safe landing page that says, hey, this is not where you want to go. So if you want to go to phishing.dsc.umich.edu, you can actually check it out. The page is accessible from anywhere. And we have this enabled for all of our end user networks, which is around 60,000 or so devices. So it's quite a large number of devices that we're protecting with this. And we're getting around 1,000 redirects a day. And the cool thing is, this is kind of a direct way that we can block a phishing site. If we know about something, we can add it into MITN, flows downhill into the DNS RPZ, and people can't get to it. So this is really protecting our users from phishing and malware. A couple of graphs to show you, hey, this is doing stuff. The numbers are kind of low on the graph, but it's the summer, and summer is quiet. So you see some top domains there. Might be small in the back, but there are definitely some domains that don't look legitimate, especially the weblogin.umich.edu.lil.cf. That's probably phishing. So the idea is, we are using Splunk to kind of visualize all of this information and identify what we're blocking. And so that's great, but how about for off-campus users? We also didn't want a budget request, but we did need an intern for this one. If people are off campus, they're not on the VPN, they're not using our DNS infrastructure, how do we protect them? So we actually generated a Chrome extension. And so it's an anti-phishing Chrome extension. It proactively identifies fake U of M web login pages. And so the way it does that is it looks for elements of the page that the user is loading. So it looks for the block M. It looks for some text that we have on our web login page. And it looks for a bunch of different indicators. And if all of those match, plus it doesn't end in umich.edu, it says, oh, this is bad. This is a phishing site. And it displays a warning to the user saying, this is not where you want to go. The cool thing is we actually get a hit when that happens. So we get a log in Splunk, so we can go back and identify that phishing site. So we could potentially actually proactively identify a phishing site before anyone even tells us about it. So that's really, really cool. And this also uses a subset of MITN threat data. So every phishing site or malware site that we identify, it consumes. And it consumes that, and then that's a list of blacklisted sites, if you want to call it that the user would get a warning page about. The cool thing is it's totally user configurable, so the user can decide that they want to continue on at their own risk and click allow, and it'll let them through. At U of M, we're all about allowing our users to be free and open. And really, it can be installed by anyone affiliated with U of M. The other thing that I didn't have here on the slide, but I do want to mention, is we've actually modularized the extension. So if anyone is interested in the code for this, I can share it out. And you could potentially use it in your environment as well to block phishing and malware based on your single sign-on page or something like that. So we also wanted to use the information in our IPS. This is going to get old, but of course we didn't have a budget request for this as well. So we're consuming this threat intelligence, the MITN threat data in our IPS, and we have it enabled for our ITS staff subnets. And so actually we have it enabled for our staff subnets, our VPN, and some pilot networks. Tomorrow we're going to turn it on for everything, so that's to come. But we're seeing 2 to 5 million blocks a day just on that. Of course, I have some cool graphs to show you, once again, that it's actually doing things. And, not surprising, looks like China and Russia are a hotspot, and they are trying to attack us. So this is really great, because one of the really interesting side effects of using this information in our IPS is it actually decreases the load. Because our IPS doesn't have to do deep packet inspection or anything on these hits. It just notices that it's a bad IP, drops the packet, and that's it. And so the IPS team, the network security team, they're like, wow, the IPS is actually, the load is lower because we're using this threat data. So once we roll this out to the entire campus, we're anticipating that that'll be even better. So if you have a tipping point IPS and you want the script, let me know. I can share it. We also wanted to use it in our NGFW as well, next generation firewall. So we have a limited Palo Alto deployment at our Dearborn campus at this point. We do have some big Palo Altos for campus, but we have not deployed them at this time. But we're kind of using Dearborn as a proof of concept to figure out how this will work. The cool thing is the Palo Altos actually display like a landing page for IP-based blocking, which is not usual. Like the IPS or other things, it just drops the connection. It doesn't tell you that something bad is happening. For the Palo Alto, it'll tell you this is not where you want to go. This is bad. And so the other cool thing is it's really, really easy. So who uses Palo Alto in the room? Sweet, like everyone. Who knows what an external dynamic list is? Fewer people. So if you're using Palo Alto and you don't have their kind of commercial threat intelligence feed, or even if you do and you want to consume threat intelligence that you generate in your Palo Alto, configure an EDL. And it's really easy. It's so much easier than the IPS. You don't have to write a script or anything. It's 3 clicks in the UI, and you can start consuming a threat intel feed. So this is easy win. Definitely do it. We also wanted to improve our email protection. also without a budget request. So we're using our MITN threat data in RSpamD to detect malicious domains. And RSpamD is just a kind of a spam filtering product, open source product. The cool thing is we do use Google, so we're Google Apps for Education shop, but all of our mail goes through our mail gateway before it gets delivered. So we use Google, but it still comes through our mail gateway. So we have the ability to do things like spam and filtering and stuff like that. Right now with this, we're temp failing and rejecting around 10,000 emails every month. We've actually blocked entire phishing campaigns. There will be times where I come in the morning, I check my graphs, and I notice, oh, there was a phishing campaign over the weekend, but no one got it because the domain was already known bad from my threat feed, and they just got temp failed or rejected, and it never got to the end user. And so we had a specific W-2 phishing scam that, of course, those are terrible, and the messages didn't even get to the end users. So this is hugely valuable and hugely impactful. Once again, the numbers are small because it's the summer, but you'll notice some things like, account locked, help desk team, mailbox alert, cPanel services agreement, which they spelled agreement wrong, a phenomenon, that's something else. But I pulled this last night. So this is fresh information. These are attacks being blocked. And sometimes we'll see a very small number of emails being sent. So like some of these phishing attacks, they'll just send a few of them, and if they don't get through, then they just move on to someone else. But if they do, then they'll send 2,000 or whatever. So this is really great as well. If you have your own mail gateways, definitely look into something like this. We're also using this to monitor and alert for malicious activity. All of this data is going into Splunk, as I probably mentioned earlier, and we're using Splunk plus the MITN data to identify attackers. So we have Splunk alerts and stuff like that tell us bad things are happening, and we can go follow up on them. We also want to share the data with our campus units. We think that's really important because campus units might have local mitigation systems that block threats at their level, and they can use this information to be more secure. So we're sharing the data with U Dearborn, which is one of our campuses, Michigan-Madison, some other units as well, so Literature, Science, and Arts, School of Information, College of Engineering, and others. And so as I was talking about earlier, we're doing kind of the two-way street model, right, where I say, hey, if you install a MITN sensor in your network or multiple MITN sensors, then you get access to the threat intelligence data that we're generating about threats that we see. And so units are very interested because they want to kind of feel like they're making a difference, and they want to feel like they're contributing to the safety of the university. So this next section is talking about all of these different things I talked about, all these different mitigation systems, and kind of putting them in a more logical sense and real-world scenarios. So who's ever been hit with a denial of service attack? Raise your hand. Fewer hands than I expected. So a denial of service attack, the idea is it's going to make a system or a service unavailable, so no one can get to it. Usually those are critical services. And so without MITN, we have an attacking host or hosts trying to talk to a campus server. It's pretty simple. It establishes a inbound network connection, and the critical service says 503 service unavailable. And that's when bad things start happening, and there are significant incidents and all this kind of crazy stuff. So with MITN, there are a lot more systems in play. And the idea is, one might ask, why would you have threat data in the IPS and in your NGFW and in unit level mitigation? And the idea, or the reason we do that, is because we don't necessarily have one system that protects everything. We have systems that are opt-in models that protect different kind of areas of our infrastructure. And so we want to take this information and put it into all of these different systems. And so once again, we have the attacking host trying to talk to our servers. Our IPS is going to say, no, this is bad traffic because I am consuming threat intelligence from MITN. I know this is bad, I'm going to block the activity. Or the NGFW can do the same thing. It's going to block the activity because of the external dynamic list that has been configured. And then if the units have mitigation systems as well, they have their own Palo Alto firewall or they have something else, they can do the same thing. Yes, sir?
Are your IPS inline, or they just consume data from the machine and block it?
No, they're inline.
So they're inline blocking?
Correct. Yeah. Inline, but they fail open, so yeah, but they are inline. And then the idea is the critical servers are not affected, and we get a 200 OK, and everyone is happy. Same thing with phishing. So we have a phisher, very evil phisher, trying to send a phishing message to a very sad recipient. The phishing message is easily sent to the recipient, and they fall for the phishing attack. Pretty simple. However, with MITN, there are, once again, more systems in play that are designed to block this type of activity. So if the phisher sends the message and our email infrastructure or our spamd notices that it's bad, it's going to block that email from going to the recipient. If it doesn't get stopped there, we're able to add it into our DNS RPZ, our response policy zone. It's going to be blocked there so the user can't go to the phishing site. If they're working from Starbucks or working from home or something like that, the Chrome extension can do the same thing. It'll tell them this is bad, you don't want to go there. And the end goal is the recipient does not fall for the phish, and they're very happy. So these are some upcoming systems that we hope to use this information in. You notice that there's a lot of different systems, different types of systems. So you have endpoint systems, you have network systems, Chrome extensions, all these different things. And the idea is we want to use this threat intelligence information really everywhere we can in our environment to make us more secure. So hindsight's 2020. Really, this is just talking about what went well, what didn't go well. Do you know who this is? LeBron James? Yeah. So I don't think he was very happy at that point. But yeah, what went well, what didn't go so well. So naming MITN was a bigger win than we expected, honestly. That was not anticipated. We didn't know that giving something that we were doing a name would, result in us speaking about it and us making stickers about it and stuff like that. But it really helped our leadership, kind of conceptualize what we were doing. Also, being very careful with our rollout plans was really a big win. Being really, really thorough with our communications, our testing, and our coordination was very, very valuable. So we didn't just shoot ourselves in the foot and roll something out that wasn't prime time ready. The idea was to do it once and do it right, and not have to go roll back and do it a second time and do it a third time. And the other thing that we did that worked really well for us is we didn't run all of our own infrastructure. So with the DNS redirection that I was talking about, we actually partnered with the DNS team, people who run the DNS resolvers, to say, hey, we want to do this thing, help us figure out how it can happen. And so we didn't want to have our own shadow IT, total copy of everything. We wanted to work with them and figure out how we can partner, and and that, in the end, then we don't run the system that is doing the mitigation. So it's better for us and better for them because they know what they're doing a lot more than me. So what didn't go so well is we did have some dependencies on other teams with resource constraints. A couple of examples, the email team, they're very busy. They're making sure that email gets delivered to people. That's kind of important. And so we wanted to turn on email malware hashes. And that took a very long time. That actually was recently enabled, but it took us a long time. Same thing with DNS query logging. We wanted to configure DNS query logging so we could look for threats in our environment for all DNS queries. But our DNS server team was worried that it would have a negative impact on the performance of the DNS resolvers. We actually offered to assist them and said, hey, what can we do to work with you to make sure that this isn't going to have a negative impact? And we developed some performance monitoring tools to kind of keep track of the performance of the DNS resolvers. And once we turned it on, there was literally no impact. But offering to assist can really help move things along and really develop those partner relationships. Interesting thing that didn't go so well, that's funny now, was not funny when it happened, is we had a widespread production outage the day and the hour that we turned on DNS RPZ. So I'm driving into work in the morning and I'm looking at my phone and I see that there's a significant incident, and it was because no one could get to anything, and my boss is, emailing me and saying, this better not be because of DNS-RPC. But thankfully it wasn't. We redeployed it a couple of days later, and no problem. So it was very odd timing. The other thing that didn't go so well is we had a specific threat feed. Nothing against Alien Vault. They do a lot of really cool stuff, but their threat feed that we were consuming was very large. Was 50 to 70,000 indicators, and there was no date on it, so we couldn't have a high confidence in the information. We didn't know how old it was, how new it was, and because of that, we weren't really using it for anything. And so we just turned that off, and that actually relieved some of the strain on our system because it was consuming a lot of intelligence that was just duplicate information because we couldn't kind of categorize it. Another thing that didn't go so well is having incongruent threat severity. So this is actually a list, and this is actually a success story. This is a list of all of the false positive notices we've gotten from our DNS-RPC. And we've had it enabled for a year and a half, and 60,000 odd devices protected at any one time, and we've received a total of 15 complaints. And that's very small, really. A couple of interesting things about this. The first domain on the list, I know it's small, but the lyris.asmstaff.org, it was actually a listserv that was indexing and kind of posting all of the emails that was sent to it. So it actually wasn't compromised, but people were sending compromised messages to the listserv. And so one of our automated threat intel services said, oh, this is a compromised domain, but that actually wasn't the case. So the good thing is we were able to whitelist it. People could get to the domain, no big worry. Thegownshop.com is a funny one. That's actually a wedding gown website in Ann Arbor. And it was compromised, but someone wanted to go there to get their wedding gown, not because they were going there because it was compromised. But really, I think this is a success story because we really haven't had to spend a lot of time tuning the information in our threat intel system. So far, it's been really great out of the box. So what is the future of MITN? And I don't know if there will be flying cars, but where do we hope to go with this project? So we want to deploy more threat intel sensors, more honeypots. We're already down that, we're kind of going down that road. We've already got over 100 honeypots, but we want to be better about how we're doing that. We also want to be smarter about how we're calculating our threat intelligence internally, and potentially work with academic resources. So we're working on talking with some really bright brains at our university and asking them if they're interested in kind of partnering on some of this stuff. We want to modularize the threat intel generation framework for others, so other people could potentially use the logic that we are using to generate threat intel in their environments. They wouldn't necessarily have to run MITN or have to run SIF, but they could use the logic. And then we want to explore how to expand the reporting and prove the value to our leadership so they know this is really valuable and this is really good. And then we're gauging interest in MITN outside of the Big Ten. So right now, MITN is kind of our way of sharing and collaborating threat intelligence. And that's part of what we're doing with the Big Ten, but we're asking, is anyone else interested? And so I guess from a wrap-up perspective, you can do this too. This isn't necessarily something that, you have to be part of the Big Ten or you have to, be part of an ISAC. I mean, the SIF project is on GitHub. Anyone can download it. Feel empowered. You can do this. It's inexpensive. We didn't spend a lot of money standing up new services, new products, new mitigation systems. We leveraged existing infrastructure. We didn't go out and buy a bunch of new stuff. It just took my time. That's really it. It's relatively simple. I don't spend all day doing this. I probably spend 25% of my time doing this. And so really doesn't take a lot of time. It's also effective. We're blocking threats. We haven't shot ourselves in the foot. We're not blocking Amazon or whatever. So that's a good thing. And it's low risk. And the last thing is, really more sharing does equal more value because the more we're sharing this information with others and they're sharing it with us, we can be smarter about what we identify as threats and make everyone more secure. So thank you very much. That's my email address. If you have any questions or if you're interested in talking more, definitely shoot me an email. I love talking about this stuff. It's like the most exciting stuff ever. And I have a bunch of MITN stickers. Like, I have tons and tons of them. So if you want any, come by and see me, and I will give one to you. Even if it's later, just come by and say, I want a MITN sticker, and I'll give you one. So any questions? Yes? Just my time. Yeah. It's been in place. So we started working on it, I'd say, 1.5 to 2 years ago. We really didn't develop it as a brand until recently, but I'd say it's been ramping up for the last probably 2 years. So, yes?
Yeah, you commented that you didn't have firewall at your borders. Is that part? Elaborate a little on how much of that is political, as in the university decentralized, and how much of it's just technical, like you've got 100 gig interface and vendors don't.
Right. So it's both. Right now we're at 100 gig. We have multiple 100 gig uplinks. We're going to 400 gig. Our networking team is like, hey, we want to do this 400 gig thing. We have symmetrical or asymmetric routing. So traffic might go up one link and come down a different link. And so it's difficult for vendors to kind of figure that out. And so it's partly that. I would say politically it's not a huge deal because we could exclude networks. So we have very bright people like Alex Halderman who scan the entire internet multiple times a day. And so he doesn't want to be blocked from doing that. So we can exclude people like that if we did have a firewall at the border. I think it's kind of a combination of the cost plus the combination of figuring out how it would actually work. Yes?
As you get lots of blocks, are you able to use that information to offer, say, education or security help to groups that seem to use the service heavily?
Yeah, so I mean that's one thing that we're not doing really great right now, but we want to be better at is, I think we're doing really good at blocking the threats, but we want to follow back up and figure out what's actually happening on devices, right? And be better at kind of fingerprinting, are there trends in our environment or even across the Big Ten? So that is something that we're definitely looking at.
So correlation of endpoint data, that's something that you didn't touch on during the presentation.
Right, so one of the upcoming systems was, we're getting a EPP product. And so we're going to be consuming and kind of pushing threat intel into it and then consuming the threat intel that comes out as well. So that's an upcoming system. Yes? So I'd say phishing campaigns, we get a lot of targeted stuff, a lot of kind of emulated. They emulate our single sign-on page and stuff like that. Right now, we're seeing a lot of just brute force attacks with our honeypots. And we're working on kind of expanding the scope of what we're looking at. We have SSH, we have a bunch of other services, but we want to expand the scope of what we're looking at as well. So, yes, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.